I've clicked onto the Global Tropical Overview for July the 13th, 2023. As is always the case in these videos, let us express your mind alone, and when making decisions ahead of any tropical cyclones, look towards our local weather office, local emergency management, and local tropical cyclone warning center. I should really say July the 13th or 14th, as we're going to start in the West Pacific, where it is July the 14th, as we're going to start talking now about Invest 95/97W. It's weird, there are two Invest designations for what appears to be the same system, but this has been given a name by Pagasa, the meteorological agency in the Philippines, that being Dodong, and this system, as it traverses right now Luzon and into the South China Sea, we're expecting this system to have a pretty good chance of at least becoming a tropical storm as it traverses the South China Sea and comes towards the China coastline. Now, there is a bit of uncertainty with the track, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But here's a close-up water vapor loop, and you can see just in general how broad this system is. It is a broad monsoonal system, but they have deep convection here in eastern Luzon, and this is about where the center was way earlier this morning. It would be last night, local time, when we got a high pass, and we could see a general circulation here east of the Luzon coastline. Now, I'd imagine by now this system has moved really close to the coastline, or maybe even over Luzon, and we'll have to see exactly how the land interaction impacts the system. But in general, the models are in fairly good agreement. In fact, last I checked, every global model wants this system to at least form into a tropical storm as it heads into the South China Sea, and it makes sense. There may be a little bit of shear in its way, but other than that, moisture content should be good, and the sea surface temperatures here are very warm as well, very conducive for tropical cyclone formation. Now, here's the GFS model, and before I go through this, I will issue a word of caution to the GFS. It is going very, very strong on this system overall. I am saying that caution because I feel like this is one of the scenarios where the GFS is having a bit of a strong bias, which is something it can commonly do, and you'll see that play out here. It puts it to a very strong typhoon. I'm not saying this is impossible, but I don't think that this is a reasonable forecast to take into full consideration right now. The main idea from guidance right now is that we get a tropical storm, maybe becoming a typhoon before it comes into either China or Hainan. And that seems like a good forecast given the time that's going to spend in the South China Sea and the monsoonal system that this is. It's not going to be a very quick development overall, of course, depending on if this low-level center survives. If this survives, it may have a better chance of getting a little bit stronger. But I'm showing you this model because this is where some of the models are differing. The GFS model has the system coming into China just west of Hong Kong. And now if we look at the European, you'll see that it is a little different. It gets towards the coastline. And in this case, regardless of if the GFS verifies or if the European verifies, you're still likely going to get impacts here, strong winds and heavy rain around Hong Kong. But the European starts to diverge the system to paralleling the China coastline and then tracks it generally towards Hainan and then Vietnam. You can also see the strength is much more reasonable, I feel, on the European, having this a tropical storm maybe getting towards a typhoon as it does spend a little more time offshore and into the warmer waters. Now, this is a sounding from the GFS. You can see what I talked about with the generally favorable conditions. The relative humidity is fairly good throughout the troposphere, about 86%. There on the mean throughout the 300 millibar to 850 millibar level. And you can also see there is a little bit of shear. We have some changing wind direction with height, where we have southwesterly winds at the surface, easterly winds aloft. Now this does result in a 21 knot shear, and that is a bit significant, and that can hinder the system a little bit. But if it does get a formidable core, it's possible the storm might be able to fend off some of that shear. That might be something of what the GFS is trying to hint at there, but I think it is still going way, way too strong with its intensification. Now, in terms of track, it's very subtle, and I've had to look at this for quite a while, but we're going to look at the 200 millibar flow as the system comes in to the South China Sea. We've got three main features here. We've got a ridge to the east over Japan. This is going to try and direct the storm into China. We have this trough up north, which in some modeling, such as the GFS, digs down into China. Now, alongside these two, we also have a ridge here over more Central Asia, Western China. And what the difference is between models, it's very subtle, but we've had some model solutions show this trough come a little bit further south in some modeling. In fact, you'll see this on the GFS. It noses down here into China a little bit more than, say, the European, which I'm about to show you. This stops this ridge here over Western China from expanding further east. So you have the storm now pretty much be funneled into China. Now, if we look at the European, for a little bit of a different scenario, you can see that trough here, it doesn't get too far south. It's a subtle difference, a very subtle difference here. But what happens is you end up getting a general ridging connecting here, sort of like this. There looks to be maybe a ridge center here. And this stops the system because it is a little bit stronger. It's able to feel this flow a little bit more and stops it from going directly into China. And it has it start paralleling the coastline because it's now following the flow of this general ridge here. It's a very subtle difference, but like I said earlier with the European scenario, if it's this close to the coastline, even if it's a little bit further offshore, keep in mind this is a monsoonal type system, you're still going to get heavy rainfall and some strong winds. I don't see much of a way, at least right now in the current forecast, that areas along the coastline of China and Hainan get away from this system without too much rainfall and or wind impacts. Now here's the GFS tracks. You can see some ensemble members are still holding on to the idea of a system trying to form on the eastern end of this whole general gyre. I'm still a bit skeptical on that. And you can see we have seen some ensembles back away from it even since yesterday. And you can see the GFS ensembles, it has solutions like the parent model, bringing it into China, and it also has solutions like the European model, having it comes towards Hainan and Vietnam. Now, here is a sea surface temperature plot. This is a general plot showing where Invest 95W is, and the sea surface temperature plot underneath. This is from Tomerberg's website. You can see, as it heads into the South China Sea, we've got very warm sea surface temperatures. So oceanic conditions are not going to be too much of an issue at all. That's probably 31 to 32 degrees Celsius waters there off the coastline. So that's not an issue at all. Now here's a forecast curve from Pagasa, and you can see the general location here of tropical depression sitting off the coastline of Luzon. And as the system traverses the Philippines, it comes off and remains a depression. Perhaps we'll have to see exactly how the low-level center is when it comes offshore, but eventually becoming a tropical storm as it comes into or near China rather. And the track here, you can see the different solutions that they've got. They've got a solution on the northern end of the solution and a southern side of the guidance envelope. And again, if it stays further south, it likely has a greater chance of becoming a typhoon. It could still become a typhoon if it comes, say, into west of Hong Kong, but we'll have to see exactly how that pans out. But for those in all these areas, make sure you stay tuned to local weather offices and the Japan Meteorological Agency. They're going to have the best information ahead of this storm. So now we're going to move to the Eastern Pacific as we have a hurricane to talk about. This is Hurricane Calvin, and the system has been getting better organized over the past several hours, even throughout the day today. And yesterday, it struggled a little bit to get to hurricane intensity. We looked like there might have been a little bit of dry air intrusion. But in general, the system looks fairly healthy now. Maybe some dry air in there. Just looking at the visible satellite, there might be some divots in the visible satellite. But what we can see if we look at the general eye of the system is deep convection wrapping around on the northern side and trying to wrap around on the western side. And really, from what I can see, this is what the system needs to be able to really start to intensify to a greater degree. Now, here's the microwave pass we got earlier in the day. You can see the strong convection on the eastern side, but it has a weaker western side. This is more low level. Here's more mid to upper levels. You can see, again, the similar signature of strong convection on the eastern side. A bit of a western core, in fact, open a little bit on the western side. What I imagine is happening here is that this big burst of thunderstorms is trying to wrap around and close off this western eye wall. And this is going to help it intensify to whatever degree it does. Now, the system does have something going for it, and that's that it's reaching a pool of greater oceanic heat content. This is a measure of how deep the ocean warmth is. So you have warm water to the surface, but how deep does that go? And you can see the greater values here and where the system is tracking right now. And you can see it gets into some fairly reasonable values before they drop off significantly as it reaches the 26-degree isotherm. So that may help it intensify. And you can see the National Hurricane Center going with about 100-mile-per-hour peak. That seems fair to me. The system is currently estimated to have winds of about 75 to 80 miles per hour. So right now, the system looks to be, about a Category 2 peak, since fair. Now, you can also see, if I look at the infrared satellite imagery and put the divergence aloft, there's very strong divergence, so that is also helping it. And you can also see the warm sea surface temperatures there. So plenty of favorable conditions there for Calvin. And here's the National Hurricane Center outlook, or forecast cone rather. And you can see that track as a hurricane over the next 3 days, and then gradual weakening. And there's the Hawaiian Islands even on the western side of this forecast cone. And for Hawaii, we have seen the European come into better agreement with the GFS today, showing not as strong as a tropical system coming your way. And this makes sense given the cooler sea surface temperatures east of the islands. And you can see it has really an open trough coming through here. But we have seen as well the models stay on an idea of the system coming towards, say, the big island of Hawaii. Now, what this would do is the system would likely track right through the Hawaiian Islands, maybe follow. We've seen some runs actually follow the Hawaiian Islands in a way for track. But what this system is going to have, it's going to have the most adverse impact on the northern side. So if this system is coming in here, like the GFS and European show, you're going to get some strong winds and some heavy rainfall possibly. Now, moisture content won't be the greatest because it is coming out of a region of fairly cool sea surface temperatures, but sea surface temperatures are warming as it heads further west. So you could see some increased rainfall there. Now, as the system comes further west, again, sea surface temperatures do increase, and there is a possibility that the system does redevelop, and we could see this system perhaps enter the Western Pacific as a tropical cyclone as well. We'll have to see exactly how that pans out. This is 6 days out here on the model, so there is a lot of time before that happens. Now we're going to move to the Atlantic for the final system. This is Invest 94L. I'll try not to take too much time here, but I got to say, out of all the systems today, this is one of the most amazing things to look at today. You can see the classic comma-shaped cloud field on 94L with the strong dry air advecting into the backside. This is a classic look for an extratropical cyclone. And this system over the next several days will have a fairly significant chance of developing into a subtropical or tropical cyclone. Here's a National Hurricane Center graphic, and you can see they're giving the system about a 60% chance of developing into a subtropical cyclone. So it really meanders around here. And still, right now, it looks like things are pretty solid. We're not expecting any significant impacts to the Azores. If that does change, I'll have further updates on that in the coming days. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching.